welcome everybody to the community call for August. There have been some changes to this format, so I'm going to keep it a little more bare bones today. I'm just going to skip around a bit. Uh, One of the main things that, in case you haven't heard, that we've changed is this is a recurring meeting now. You should have gotten an invite for a series, and this should recur on the third Thursday of every month at this time. It's a decision that the team made just because we felt like when we were not necessarily feeling like there was an hour's worth of content to cover or, a speaker who could come on for 30 minutes, it just kind of caused things to drag a bit. But we want you to still be able to have a direct line with us, to be able to chat with us, and to be able to bring your own agenda items even to the meeting. Of course, we're always welcoming presenters, but if you just want to ask a question, we're hoping that that open format will be a little less stressful or a little less, yeah, just more straightforward experience. So. Um, a couple things just about the team in case you haven't joined one of these before. So our team that Mark and myself work on, and Mark will talk in a bit. We are the Azure deployments team. Our real goal is to make Azure the platform of choice for everybody. And we are making sure that we make a frictionless and high quality experience for folks uh, to basically succeed on any of their tools. So our team owns ARM templates, Bicep, Terraform, and we actually don't really mind if you use Bicep or you use Terraform. ARM templates is a little outdated nowadays, so if it's new stuff, we probably recommend you use one of the other tools. But overall, we are saying that you can be set up for success on either. And yeah, we believe that there is a um, big benefit to all of that. Other than that, there are a few ways that this community was formed. We mainly just wanted to make sure that everybody felt prioritized and included within the feedback for product future and vision. And some of the ways that we're currently investing in that effect is, of course, joining the community. We also want you to be participants within the Slack. So make sure to join the Slack if you haven't. You can sign up to present. These are going to be monthly. So if there's a certain month that you want to do, we welcome you and you can just talk about some stuff that you're looking to share with the community. We have blog posts, so we have the latest updates on stuff that's coming out. I know we haven't had one recently. We are in the middle of getting that towards the end of this month / the beginning of next. So if you want to follow the community call recordings or any other YouTube, then we will go ahead and do that. And then Twitter and X is a great way to make sure that we share a bunch of stuff. Torkel, we can definitely share the slides, but right now I'm about to hand it over to Mark, and I think after that, we don't actually have slides for the remainder of the deck today. To be honest, I'm reusing an old deck from a few months back. So with all that being said, I think we'll hand it over to Mark, and I don't know if Mark, you wanted to share about anything in particular with the Copilot, but the floor is all yours.
Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to give folks kind of an overview of the Copilot work that we have released. There was a question in Slack after I put the announcement up there, so I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of kind of what we've done and give you a kind of an overview of where we're going and our timelines and stuff like that. So as a kind of a give you an idea of where we are right now. We released the Terraform support in the Azure Copilot, and I'll show you what that means and how you can access it and all that stuff in just a minute. But we've done kind of a limited preview of it where it is available to everybody, but we haven't put a big announcement out there letting everyone know. We've essentially just let this community know, and we're hoping that you can use the Copilot and give us feedback on that so we can make improvements going forward. From a timeline perspective, we are targeting the October-November timeframe to do a public preview where we kind of broadly announce the functionality. And at that point, we'll have new features and functionality and better quality for the handler at that point. So one of the other things that I want to make sure that everyone is aware of and comfortable with on this call is hopefully you feel comfortable just jumping off of mute. Don't feel like you have to follow up with questions offline or anything like that. This should be an interactive call. So if you have questions at any point, especially when Stephen and I are kind of presenting stuff, feel free to jump off and ask any questions. So with that, I'll spend a few minutes here showing you the Copilot functionality that we have added, how you access it and all that kind of stuff. So I will share my screen here real quick. If I can find the right screen. All right. So let me know if you can see my screen all right. All right. So we have added Terraform code generation to the Azure Copilot. If you go to the Microsoft Copilot in Azure marketing name there, you can see kind of the information about what Copilot is, what it does. And one of the things you can see here is the enhanced scenarios. And we have added information in the enhanced scenario here about Terraform. So you can see that you can actually generate Terraform infrastructure or Terraform code from the Copilot. And this gives you an overview of what we can do, what the limitations are, and some sample prompts and stuff like that. So you can get an idea of what you can accomplish with that right now. The way that you actually have access to the functionality is by clicking on the Copilot button up here. I don't know what the exact stats are for that right now, but it's available to the vast majority of customers at this point. And unless your organization has decided not to expose it to you. But if it's exposed to you, you have Copilot up here, you click Copilot, it opens the side pane here. And then we are integrated with the Copilot. So if you ask anything that has anything to do with Terraform, it's going to actually pop up and give you the code for that. And I'll show you that here real quick. So if I just take one of my sample prompts here and paste it in here, you can see that if I ask it to do a OpenAI deployment using ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo and the specific model ID, and run that, what happens is Azure Copilot has bunch of different skills or handlers there. And what it's doing is going through and parsing the question and determining which handler it needs to pass it to. You can see here that it sees that it's a Terraform question, so it passes it to our handler or our skill, and then our skill takes it over from there, takes the question and goes and generates a configuration. And I have opened a bug on this, but there's some weird behavior here in dark mode. I should have fixed that before demoing, but we give an overview, kind of here's answer to your question. We give a summary of what the configuration has in it here. And then we give you the configuration here on the right-hand side. And this is a full working configuration for Terraform, including variables and all that kind of stuff. Right now, the option that you have is to take that configuration. You can look at it in here and do what you want to in there, but essentially what most customers will do is copy that configuration, paste it in VS Code, and then kind of go from there. But it gives you a really good starting point for the configuration. And you can see here that in Visual Code with the Terraform extension installed, I'm not getting any red squigglies here. So this is valid Terraform code. So you can be comfortable knowing that you're not going to have to go tweak things and add properties and fix all that kind of stuff. The other thing that you'll see here is that we provide the provider block. as well as variables. So we're not just giving you static text in the resources themselves. We give you some good variables in here, and we will work on kind of tweaking the kind of level of variables we use versus the static values. But right now you can kind of see that the vast majority of these are either um, uh, implicit references or variables. But you can take that and go from there and actually run that configuration. But you can see that you get a good valid configuration to that has some best practices from a variable and Terraform coding perspective included in it. So you can actually use that to get started. We have done some customer interviews and got some feedback on kind of the experience that we have so far, and are working on improving different aspects of this experience. One of the asks that we have, as you can probably, first thing that came to your mind is this kind of side panel experience is not ideal for this code, where customers there's can't really see a lot of the code, and kind of that experience is terrible. So we're looking at ways that we can improve that in before the public preview, so that you can actually have an experience where you can actually see all the code and get a better experience there, and maybe ask some follow-up questions and what have you. You can ask some follow-up questions. So if you want to change and ask a follow-up question, you can do that. As I showed you before, when you ask that follow-up question, Azure Copilot is going to try to route that question appropriately. So it's going to go back to Azure Copilot, and it may or may not come back to our handler. I think they've made some improvements there, so it is fairly good at that. But you can kind of have that multi-turn conversation with this and add stuff to the configuration or kind of fix things or what have you. One of the things to keep in mind there is that the way that we currently work is if you ask a follow-up question, like you want to kind of change one of the values or something like that, you can ask that follow-up question, but the handler will essentially recreate the code. So we don't have a way currently of saying, oh, you wanted to update this one resource. So we'll just update that one resource. We actually regenerate all of the code. So you may end up with a completely different sample. So just keep that in mind as you have kind of those multi-turn conversations here. The other thing that we want to do and would love your feedback on is to understand what you would want to do with this code after it's generated in the portal. So is copy and paste in VS Code or whatever your editor of choice okay, or would you want some other mechanism to have a button down here that says send this to a file, download this to a file, or what have you? So any feedback that you have there would be super helpful as well. And that is pretty much the overview from a Copilot perspective. We hope you can try it out and can kind of get some benefit out of it. And if you have any feedback, please do provide feedback. So the way that you provide feedback here is once you ask the question, if you like the response, you can give it a like. If you don't like the response, you can dislike. So if you like it, you can tell it why or what was good about it and provide some details if you want, and then hit submit. We check this on a regular basis, so your feedback will be looked at. So you can send responses or feedback to us through the Slack community, but doing it this way will give us a better way of tracking it, and the developers will see it and all that kind of stuff too. So you can choose your way of providing your feedback, and we can work with you on that. So, all right, any questions anyone has?
I see Alex is
Alex?
all.
Do you guys have any intention on making like a VS Code extension for this?
We do, yeah.
Okay.
We have so we're looking at ways to provide kind of this functionality where you are. That's another one of the pieces of feedback that we've had in customer interviews is they work in VS Code. So going to the portal to get these hints and then going back to VS Code would be kind of a pain. So we're looking at ways to expose this functionality in VS Code as well. And that's something that we're hoping to do in that same time frame, that public preview time frame, but if not, shortly after that.
Cool.
Yeah, the one not concern, but thing that we have to, or one of the things we have to work through there is the GitHub Copilot, and we don't want to have the GitHub Copilot and whatever Copilot experience we have in VS Code kind of stepping on each other's toes. So we are working, or we've started working with the GitHub Copilot team to make sure that we provide a good experience there.
Speaking of GitHub Copilot, there's a question about if there is a significant difference between the answers that are given if I go to the portal and I generate.
Yeah, so that's what we've spent the vast majority of our time on, is ensuring that we have high quality responses. So the GitHub handler doesn't do any, as far as I know, it's not doing any optimization from a Terraform code perspective. It's essentially giving you whatever the responses are from the model that they're using. I think it gives some good responses, but in my experience in working with it's probably right 50-60% of the time, and then you have to tweak it from there. Um, what we've done is made sure that 80+% of the time you get good answers, and we'll improve that from there. So we're working hard to ensure that the Terraform responses that you get are high quality, and we'll continue to improve from there. So,
And if there is any reason that that is not happening and you're hitting like 40% accuracy or something like that, please reach out. And as much as you're willing to share, it's super valuable for us because we don't want Mark to be the only person who gets 80%. We want everyone to feel that way.
and that is what the thumbs down is for. Don't be shy about hitting the thumbs down. If you ask a question today and it's a good response, hit the thumbs up. If you ask tomorrow and it's a bad response, hit the thumbs down. So we definitely do want that feedback from you, and we do track it very closely.
There's another question. Is there anything being done to ground the model that the handler runs to Terraform module documentation? So there's a minimization on hallucination of parameters.
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of work on that. We right now have a golden data set that we use to help ground the model. We're doing some other approaches to try to take into account the schema of the resources so that we can lock it to that. That's like I mentioned, that's a lot of the work that we're doing between now and public review, is improving that quality and making sure that the answers that we provide are valid answers. One of the ways that we are planning on doing that we have experimented with in the past, is by doing a Terraform validate. So as part of the response, we'll actually do a Terraform validate on the code. And if there's an error, we'll pass it back into the model and kind of do that iteration loop of making sure that the answer that you get is valid Terraform syntax.
There's a question here that I will take, but then also hand off to you. Can we do a reverse in Copilot to codify a resource? We do have a tool that doesn't necessarily use Copilot called Azure Export for Terraform that will work on any sort of resource that has a corresponding resource in Azure RM or ACPI as a provider. So that would be a great place for you to get started. I will drop a link to the GitHub in the chat. But at the same time, Mark, is there any plans to point at a resource and tell Copilot to generate?
Yeah, so we haven't started on it yet, but one of the things that we do expect to be able to do is kind of improve the response of the Terraform export that Stephen was talking about, where we can actually ensure that you have looping and all that kind of stuff in the export, so you actually get better quality code out of that. Right now, it takes what you have in Azure, dumps it to Terraform, and there's some static values and stuff like that, where I think adding a large language model that to that could actually improve that experience. So that is definitely something worth looking at doing. That is not on the plan for the October, November timeframe, but it is something that we are thinking about.
Another one, is there a plan to have GitHub Copilot have access to this model so there's parity? It'd be a pain to jump back and forth, I guess.
Yeah, there's not a plan for that right now, but we are in communications with the GitHub Copilot team to see what we can do to ensure that you don't have that disparity between our Copilot and kind of the GitHub Copilot. So we will let you know how we make progress there, but we don't have a plan yet on how we can kind of ensure that quality in GitHub Copilot.
Any other questions? And feel free to come off mute. Okie dokie. I think that's it on the Copilot stuff. Thank you, Mark. So
Sorry, Stephen, to interrupt you. I was writing, but it's too hard on the mobile. On the last question and on the last part, I think it would be valuable because I have a lot of engineers working for me in my team, and sometimes they have to kind of mock on our subscriptions the deployments that we want to do for customers, and this ability to export, so you mock it on a subscription and you export the Terraform. And yes, we do use the tool that you've sent here on the chat, but it would be useful if you can use this to, hey, I have this, give me the Terraform for these resources. It would be highly valuable to save you time. So I think it's an area that you should invest.
Yeah. So to make sure I understood you correctly, so essentially, you're giving a bump to the scenario of I have some infrastructure in Azure right now. I'm going to export that to Terraform, and I want that to be better quality. So having that assisted by some sort of copilot would be an important scenario for you. Is that correct?
Yeah, Mark, it's exactly that. That will help a lot and would save us a lot of time because, as I've said, you mock your scenario, you do some experiments on your Azure subscriptions, our company Azure subscriptions. We want to do this and deploy this to a customer. I mock it on my subscriptions, something that helped me easily produce the Terraform, not with fixed values like we have now, and just, okay, I have all of the code, I can do some of the fixes manually. Okay, that's my work. And then just progress on the customer work. I think that would be highly valuable, and it would save a lot of time.
So do you think, I'm not minimizing the need for this or anything, but do you think the kind of the chat experience might change or might kind of change that flow over time where the folks that work for you don't have to go into the portal and run through the kind of create experience in the portal and then try to turn that into Terraform, but rather they can essentially describe what they want in their language and have it generate the code and then apply it from there?
Well, to be honest, most of the guys, they work on Visual Studio Code, right? But we are still, far away from that, right? Having a Visual Studio Code that I can say, hey, point at this, give me the Terraform code. If you have it on the portal, I think that's, well, probably the easiest way of having this feature for you guys to develop this feature on a more advanced experience. Visual Studio Code, or I think that's the biggest editor that most people use nowadays. That would be great, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I've mocked this here, there. give me the Terraform, put the code on my editor, and let me continue the work.
Great. Thanks, Pedro. All right, Torquil, you're up.
Yeah, I have a question. It's regard that when you generate the code, I'm sitting and also writing a lot of Terraform, and how can you, or was it possible somehow that like you have themes in VS Code, or that you somehow could control the generated code that it has to apply to some code styles or guidelines, that it will be possible to, so when it generate it can generate following some guide. I cannot specify how to, but it is, otherwise it just becomes a code generator.
Yeah.
Where you maybe are sitting and picking or grabbing the code that it is generating, but you want to have it in another style, and it could be nice somehow if you could enforce it to create modules, for instance, in a certain way, or subdivide things in a certain way, and so if you could put some controls where you could say that it should have separation of concerns, modules and extensions which are put into modules. Nobody says that what I'm saying is what other people would like to do, but it's just that to avoid that it just becomes a kind of code generator where you look at it and then you code it in another way afterwards.
Yeah. So we do have a number of things that we have in mind along those lines. So one of the things that we heard loud and clear when we talked to customers was kind of a low-hanging fruit, if you will, is their naming schema. So they'd love to essentially have Copilot know about the naming schema, so they don't have to change those.
That's one thing.
That's something that we're looking into how to enable. But the other thing, as you mentioned, when we move this to VS Code, we should have visibility into, or provide the ability for the customer to say, use this directory as kind of a guide. So this has my code in there. This is how I structure it. This is the naming schema that I use. Kind of use that as a guide. And that's certainly something that we should be able to do to kind of more personalize the responses for you, so that you get, instead of a generic response, you get a response that aligns with your company expectations, essentially.
But I also think one of the key things when you do Terraform code is to understand the life cycle of the resources, and normally you want maybe to separate things, and it could also be helpful here if the Copilot could the worst thing you can do is to put everything into one resource groups and just have your resources there and do it in Terraform, and suddenly when you remove something, suddenly everything is recreated. So it's also somehow that it helps you to understand the life cycle of of your design, and maybe suggest you split something, because if you just have a coder with just code without really, one thing is design is not only to code and generate Terraform where it can create a resource group and a VNet and a VM, but it is maybe to say, okay, please put them into two different resource groups, or to avoid that maybe your VNet is not directly associated to the VM. That it somehow also suggests how to arrange your infrastructure so it works best for Terraform.
Interesting. Okay, that sounds like a good hard to think about.
Yeah, because we have put a lot of effort. When we started Terraform, it was a bit naive, and we was not really aware about all these side effects you can have if you are putting things too much, cluster them too much together. So now we have network separated from, and subnets and things like this, and we have VMs in special resource groups. We have the NAT gateway somewhere else, and we have things when you code, you like to have small modules so that you easy to read, easy to understand, and easy to change. And it could be nice if your Copilot somehow not, it could actually try to say to you, this is a bad composition.
Yeah.
Because if you do this, then next time you do a change, suddenly it recreates too many infrastructure components, maybe even your database, and this you don't want.
Yeah. Awesome. Love the feedback. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Dominic.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk about generating Terraform from existing resources, and that's been an area that I've been focusing on. And unfortunately, I forgot to get my manager's permission before this meeting, so I won't be sharing my screen, but I've shared in the chat a link to the GitHub repo where I've been working on a tool for doing this, taking existing resources and generating Terraform from them. And under the GitHub releases, there should be a Windows and Linux binary for this. But the gist of it is that through PowerShell, I had originally created some workflows for listing all the resource groups and then dynamically creating the import blocks for them. So like import and then ID of the resource group and then 2 equals some auto-generated name. And then running the command that takes those import blocks and generates the Terraform from them. And I did that with PowerShell, and I found that that didn't scale appropriately. So I've rewritten the thing in Rust, and now it's a general kind of pattern of pointing it at existing cloud resources and trying to generate more human-style Terraform, because I've noticed that with the AZTF export tool, it works, but it takes a while to do its thing, and it will generate like resource 0, resource 1, resource 2. So the naming isn't as one would have done if they were to write it as a human. So I've tried to make my tool follow a little bit more of a human pattern where the first step is deciding what you want to import. So there's been talk about you don't want to put everything in one resource group, and the same thing kind of applies. You don't want to put all your Terraform resources in one folder, because then your every apply command takes 30 minutes for it to check every resource that you've declared. So being able to optionally import everything, or just pick, like, I want to import these 3 resource groups that share a common concern, but may not even be from the same subscription. The tool is designed so that it's will quickly be able to list all the resources. So one of the things that Terraform does is when you run apply or whatever, it does the check to see if everything matches. So it's saying, you're talking about 6 resource groups. I'm going to go individually check each of those. But instead, using the Azure CLI, I just list all the resource groups, or use the graph, because sometimes the graph is faster than the Python CLI, to list everything, so that when you want to import a resource group, they're just all available there. It doesn't have to iterate through all the subscriptions and take a while. And it's kind of a multi-step process, because when you get the generated code, even after running the import blocks, it's not without flaws. So if you import a role assignment, then the generated code has both the role definition ID and the role name. So it could say contributor or /subscription/whatever/contributor. And that fails Terraform validate, because you can only have one of those properties. So as part of the cleanup step, after generating this code, there's a bunch of kind of linter, whatever, where it will prune the properties that fail the Terraform validate. So if you have role assignments that it's imported, it will prefer the role definition name over the hard-coded ID, just because that's like the human way to write it. And similar for security groups, it will comment out when the members or the owners is an empty array, because that's also invalid. And the other thing is that for security groups, when you declare members within the security group definition, it expects a list of object ID strings. So instead, using the Azure AD users data block, you can specify a list of user principal names. So by dynamically determining all the object IDs that you've referenced in the imported security groups, it creates one big users block that looks up all those users. And then using a local block, it creates a dictionary where the key is the email and the value is the object ID. And then for each of the security group definitions, it does a substitution. So instead of saying members equals and then a list of strings that are just object IDs, it's a list of references within that map, so that you see the email of the users, and it all works out so that when you run Terraform plan or apply, it will dereference all of those, so that it still results in a list of object IDs. But when you look at the code, it's references that use the emails. So it's trying to approximate the human written code from the generated code. And this is multiple kind of incentives for doing it this way. One of them is just like disaster recovery. If you have a bunch of infrastructure that you've created through ClickOps and you don't have the code for, then as people have mentioned, you want to be able to just point something at it and get all your Terraform for it. And the strategy for this has been pretty good. I've taken this approach for some of the role assignments and like security group stuff at a specific area of our tenant and exported it as Terraform, and then created a pipeline that runs every day and says, is there changes detected? So that if a user gets removed from the org or added to a security group, then that results in drift that the pipeline then notices. And currently that's a manual process where the pipeline will fail just to let us know, and then we have to fix it in the repo. But I'm looking forward to the future for creating some kind of interface for a conflict resolution. So instead of a textual diff, it'd be a more attribute based and says, a user has been added to this group or a user was removed from this group. Do you want to keep this change or do you want to revert it, kind of thing? So that's something I've been working on, and hopefully I'll be able to share some slides and some demos in the future.
Awesome.
That's what I was gonna say, Dominic. I'm like, hey, I work on Azure Expert for Terraform, and I'm impressed. So can you come and talk about this for 30 minutes, because it does sound really, really cool. So
yeah, I will make sure to run it by my manager, and then I'll get some demos set up for sure.
okay, we'll follow up with you then.
Perfect.
Javier or Mark, were you going to say something? Okay.
Nope, just was going to ask Javier.
I put my question in the chat also, but just wanted to ask if you guys were looking at or doing any work on like visual representations of the Terraform, having that be a you know, I know there were some projects that we did with Bicep and ARM that were visualizers that, you know, did a good job at least of showing relationships. I know there's some really good tools on the no code side that do a good job of also kind of you know, showing properties and things. Is there any, I guess, anything that you guys are exploring with that?
Thank you for bringing that up. It is something that I certainly, or we certainly have in mind. We don't have anything imminent or anything like that, but it's definitely something that we understand how customers work, and they diagrams would make things a lot easier. So it is something that we're thinking about, but nothing we're going to deliver in the next few months or anything. So
for diagrams, there is the.
How is that for a non-committal answer, Javier?
I mean, just wanted to see where you guys are thinking on it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it is something that we understand the value for it. It's a hard problem, but it's something that we would love to deliver. So, sorry, Dominic.
There is a Terraform graph command that can export a primitive kind of markup of the stuff, and then you can render it with, I think Pandoc has a renderer or something, but I've found it to not be kind of the greatest. So in addition to the tool I'm making, I'm also trying to create a visualizer. So my initial thoughts are just creating like a force-directed graph where you have a node for each resource group and subscription and kind of go from there.
One random thing that I need to make sure we talk about. So Mark, how do we use the Copilot today? Is it just through the Azure Copilot portal, or is there anywhere else that I can go and get those handler results?
No, right now it's only through the Azure portal. So you click the Copilot button in there, like I showed at the beginning, and that's the only access you have to it right now.
And do I need to like sign up for a preview or anything, or is it just auto rolled out for me?
It's auto rolled out, but my understanding is that organizations have control over it. So there's a certain percentage of Azure customers that have it enabled, but then the organization that it's enabled for can kind of disable it if they choose. So if they don't want their customers to use it for security reasons or whatever, they can disable it. So And that is all or nothing. So it is either you have access to Azure Copilot or you don't. They can't control the individual handlers that you have access to inside of that.
Got it. We have a lot of interesting diagram, visualize, AZ-Viz things in the chat.
Definitely a lot of open source and tools out there to do that right now.
All right, we have about 15 minutes left. The floor is open. So if you have anything you want to talk about or bring up as a topic for the product team or for folks in the group, now's the time. So
Well, if nobody else speaks, then I just want to say that's a very good idea that you guys have this monthly schedule that we change ideas here. So kudos for you guys.
glad you like the new schedule. We're hoping that this will help people attend more frequently too, because now they know, okay, it's going to be this time. So it's on the calendar weeks in advance. Torkel?
Yeah, sorry. Maybe it's hard to answer this question, but what do you think about this Terraform Open Tufo? I mean, there's this clone of Terraform, and can it affect? I mean, the Copilot could be trained in both dialects, maybe depending on how the world is moving. I'm personally for Terraform, but yeah, it can be others are for Open Tufo. I don't know, but it's and you don't know where things are moving. It depends on how the community and support and things like this.
From our perspective, we're close partners with HashiCorp. We work with them almost every day. So we are committed to supporting Terraform. My understanding is that OpenTofu is a drop-in replacement for Terraform. So all of this code that we generate for Terraform should work just fine with OpenTofu. So if customers choose to use OpenTofu, the work that we're doing here should help them as well. The Terraform export, the AI stuff that we're doing, all of that should just work.
Fine.
If I can give my input on that, my company is about 8K engineers. We have a huge code base for Terraform, and of course we've heard about OpenTofu and we've explored it, but let's be honest, we have so many big companies worldwide where we are using Terraform that it simply doesn't make sense now to change to OpenTofu. So you also have to think about your customers. What do you say to your customer? Hey, we've promoted the usage of Terraform for so many years, and we've used it on all of our deployments, and now we're going to OpenTofu just because. It's not easy, right?
No, and you can say Microsoft is trying to uncover or motivate you to use Bicep. Others are on Terraform, and it's a kind of community things. If developers somehow find some preferences, something. I'm not saying we are also for Terraform. I like Terraform, but I just say that there's some shifts, some changes, and then I just want to hear just an opinion around these kind of things, also in regard to support. If the Copilot could be trained in different languages, and by that way you ask Terraform, the code generator, when it generates codes, I would like to have it in OpenTofu. I would like to have it in plain Terraform in according to some specific version, and so you can actually set some indication of flags, your preferred version dialogue. Yeah.
not from an open tofu perspective, because like I said, it should just be the same syntax. We are doing that, or yeah, we are doing that for our different providers. So our current responses are all using Azure RM. But as part of our public preview, or actually our next release, will support AZ API as well. So like you suggest there, we will give the user the ability to say, I want a response to be in Azure RM or AZ API or what have you. So it should, I mean, that could be extended to other languages and stuff like that as well. So.
And I think the thing is right, like we are trying to support customers for whatever workflows they need. And like Mark mentioned, OpenTofu right now, syntactically and implementation wise, is very similar to pre-existing Terraform. So it's really a smoke and mirrors thing if we say, oh, OpenTofu or Terraform, it's the same code. So if you want to use it, you're totally empowered to.
Actually, from the perspective of our providers, OpenTofu, from my understanding, actually uses the same providers. So they just have a fork of the providers that they update on a regular basis. So the responses that we give, other than language syntax and stuff like that, the resources and their schema are identical.
Yeah, good.
Jason?
Yeah, so kind of thinking about Azure Verified Modules a little bit and trying to walk a walk of introducing those, but having had an issue with CAP Terraform module, like external module adoption. I just want to make sure that you guys are still, that's live and vibrant and going and growing and all that good stuff. And then was also wondering if maybe you guys would be interested in doing any kind of back conversation around your engineering criteria or the way that you create modules and the reasons why you do it that way. Maybe a YouTube video or something along those lines that kind of articulates that so that we could show that to management and get further adoption. Those type of things on the verified modules. I'm just kind of curious. I didn't hear anything today about that.
So, sorry, what were you asking for from the verified modules again? Kind of
So
more.
is it alive and going, and are you still there? There was a lot of conversation around
Okay,
earlier.
Gotcha. So yeah, so to give a very high level update, so we started out on a mission to enable or to create Terraform verified modules. We made some progress on that. And as our team that works closely with customers, so the customer success team started working with customers, customers wanted the flexibility to have that same modularization for Terraform and Bicep. So that team has actually taken over that initiative. So there's an Azure verified modules, which is you can get to here, which has I think for Terraform now we have about 50 verified modules, and they are covering a whole bunch of different things. They include best practices from a WAF perspective and those types of things. So they've really taken what we started and are running with it. And it is being contributed to by internal Microsoft folks as well as external folks. So if any of you are interested in contributing, there's in that link that I provided there's guidance on how to do that as well. So they're always interested in getting that kind of help, essentially.
And then you guys had a in your documentation for AVM, you have some guidelines or some developer guidelines. Would you have any kind of YouTube or anything that kind of walks through? I know you guys have documented them. Kudos for that. But anything that kind of goes through how you came to those determinations and what pitfalls or whatever led you to building those guidelines? Anything along those lines?
I don't think we have anything like that right now. I can work with the AVM team and see if that's something that we can put together. But from a kind of a high level perspective, like I mentioned, this team actually works with customers on a regular basis. And they have consolidated the kind of practices and philosophies and stuff like that that they have when working with customers into these modules.
Okay.
And they've given
Thank you.
talks before, Jason, about how they kind of build these modules out and what sort of pipelines are involved and the sort of decision trees that are there. But in terms of walking through everything step by step, like Mark said, I don't think there's something there, but there is a lot of content that they've put out, even on our own YouTube channel, about the verified modules and how that whole process works. So
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'll
they
go
did
back
a
and look again.
they did a good session at the last HashiConf at HashiConf 2023. So I think all of that stuff is posted to YouTube. So if you take a look or look for Matt White, or maybe someone just posted that. Yeah, so that'll give you a good overview of those and kind of the flow through that. So
Wonderful. Thank you.
quick question here. Do we have contacts with the Radius team? Actually, there was someone who was on the call who worked pretty regularly with Radius. I don't know if Mark, you have any contact with them, but we've talked to them maybe like once or twice. Jeffrey, if you want to follow up with us and send an email about what you're curious about, we can forward that to the team if you're interested or wanting them to get to have conversations with them. All right, we have a few minutes left. Any other topics or questions or comments? Going once, going twice. And that seems to be a great first monthly call. So thank you everybody for joining. This was a lot of fun and really appreciate the enthusiasm from folks. Absolutely would encourage everyone to come again and bring any of your questions and your things that you want to bring up. And we'll be here at the same time next month. So have a great rest of your August and see you in September.
Thank you.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.